My name is Glenn Thomas, and I am the pastor at St. Matthew Lutheran Church. And after a long bout of dealing with arthritis, a few years ago I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. As I've been through this journey and dealing with all of the medical and physical questions, I've also discovered that there are, in this process, a lot of spiritual questions. And I've learned some things about myself and my faith and about the grace of God and how it is active in my life. Recently I had a chance to read a book by Stuart Govig called Strong at the Broken Places. And it was a book written to the larger community about how to be in partnership with and how to minister to and for persons who are living with disabilities. But as I read that book, it occurred to me that there was another word underneath that. For people who do live with disabilities and how our unique situations and our particular viewpoints and understandings of life might be a benefit, might be a witness even to the work of God's grace in the world. So I invite you to share with me these reflections as we think about who we are as persons, as whole persons, but as people who live with disabilities, and what particular special gifts we might have to offer the world. This is Persistent Grace. I want to read this morning from the second letter to the Corinthians, the 12th chapter, where Paul writes, "But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong.'" We live in a world that is so transactional in nature. You only get in this world what you earn or what you pay for. Your worth is measured by the contributions that you make, and so we value strength and success and accomplishment, and we look down on weakness and neediness. That's not how life works in faith. Faith is based on a promise. Not something that we have earned or deserved, but something given freely to us by God, the promise of His grace in Jesus Christ. And living on that promise is a very different experience than the way that the world normally works. Something I've learned a lot about since my MS diagnosis as I've come to deal with living with my own weaknesses and shortcomings. I've learned a lot about what it means to be constantly dependent on others for help, to never be able to fully live up to the expectations of the world, to be constantly dealing with a weakness, a pain, a shortcoming. And to discover there is where God's grace really becomes full for me and sufficient. It is interesting in the Bible, in fact, that none of the important figures are really perfect. Moses has a speech impediment. Paul talks here about this thorn that was given to him, whatever that might be. But in all of those moments, we are reminded of how important and how sufficient and how all-powerful God's grace is. In fact, it seems that it is in those human weaknesses that God's work is more visible, more knowable, more important. I think that people who live with disabilities discover that for themselves, and I think that's why we have such an important role to play in the world. That as we have discovered in our faith what it means to live being weak, and to discover in our own weakness how God's love helps us and holds us and keeps us, reminds us that we are valuable, and in doing so transforms us into new and I think better and more faithful people. As we have learned that, what an important lesson it is for us to share in a world where people are constantly distancing themselves from grace, people constantly believing that they can do it on their own, discovering that they can't. My experience with my disability is it has drawn me closer in faith to God, has brought me closer in that relationship, has made him a much more important part of my life. And I think that's an important message to share. And I have a feeling you have that same message to give as well. How do we help people discover what it means to truly live in grace and to truly discover how it can really transform your life? Part of that change comes, of course, from getting rid of what is old, getting rid of that false notion of independence and self-sufficiency, and helping us understand what it means to live a life fully dependent on the grace and mercy of God, as we are so dependent on so many other things in this world. What does it mean to be new? That's what people are looking for. Something that will make them feel new and different, something that will lift them up out of this world and this life, something spiritual that will transform and change the way that we live our life every single day. There are a lot of places in the Bible where it talks about things that are new, about being made new, about how the Word of God is constantly making all things new. There are two that come particularly to my mind. One, of course, comes at the end of the Bible in the book of Revelations, where finally, after all the turmoil and tribulation, God brings in a new heaven and a new earth and makes all things right and good again. And it is the hope of that. It is the promise of that, the certainty of the promise of that makes it possible for the saints to survive all of the trials and tribulations that come in the meantime. Helping people understand that it is possible to live with difficulty. It is possible to survive pain and suffering. It is possible to be whole as a person even when you are not whole in your body. And to know that sense of hope of how things actually are despite how things might look. That's what makes it possible for me to get up every single day. I think that would be an important message to give to people. The other, of course, comes in the midst of the prophets, and Isaiah in particular. When God is speaking to the Israelites in their troubles, in their time of exile, when they are alone and far from home and not sure what the future holds. And he says to them through Isaiah, "See, I am making all things new." And he expresses that not just in the future tense, someday I will make your life better. He tells them that he is at work accomplishing that salvation even in the midst of their very troubled times. That's a word that we need to hear. Not just because we're living with a disability, but that is a word that all human beings need to hear. God has not abandoned us or our world when life is difficult. That God is in the midst of these moments making us brand new. Because we are more than what we seem. We have greater value than what we just simply offer. We have the gift of the grace and the mercy of God, the love shown to us in Jesus Christ. We are lovely in His eyes, and that is sufficient for our lives. We do not need to be more than what we are. We do not need to lose our disabilities or our struggles, because even in the midst of our weakness, we know that God is strong at work in and through us. I thank you for joining me in this series of reflections on this book, Strong at the Broken Places. I hope you will continue to stay connected to Persistent Grace through our Facebook page. Soon we will be beginning a weekly service, a time of prayer. And I would invite you to share your prayer concerns either by direct messaging me or making a comment on the Persistent Grace page or contacting me directly at St. Matthew Church. And we'll use those prayer concerns. We will lift them up and pray for one another during those times. I hope that you'll keep your eyes open for more information coming soon. God bless, and have a really wonderful day.